Zombies ate my neighbors. And apparently those neighbors were rancid, weren't properly seasoned. Released in 1993 for the Super Nintendo Entertainment System and also the Sega Genesis, courtesy of Konami and LucasArts. This is an overhead action game where you take control of one of two kids, or invite someone to play the other kid and enjoy some two-player co-op action as you run around 50 plus levels of zombie-filled mayhem where your main goal is to rescue all the victims, survivors, whatever you want to call them, before they are killed off by zombies, and more zombies. Note to self, there should be a funny picture for the last zombie and a scream, otherwise nobody's going to get that. Okay, so Zombies Ate My Neighbors. Apparently this got a re-release recently for the modern platforms, and as a bonus feature, they also included the follow-up titled Ghoul Patrol. Now there's a game that deserves to be tossed into the proverbial meat grinder, but I digress. So this is a simple and straightforward premise for a game. Find all the surviving neighbors and touch them to rescue them before they're killed off by the zombies. Otherwise, it's fairly easy to grasp at first, but then things get more complex as the adventure progresses onwards. At first, it's minor things like finding keys to open doors, to unlock new paths, or possibly acquire some secret stash. Then other hazards will be introduced, such as mutating plants, conveyor belts, other things of that nature, other creatures for that matter. The levels themselves are rather large, maze-like contraptions that one can find themselves lost in fairly easily, but you do have a radar that you could bring up with the L or R triggers, which gives you an idea as to where survivors might be. You'll need to make use of this constantly, especially as you have fewer victims to rescue as time progresses onwards. But let's backtrack a bit. You start off each new game with a water gun as a starting weapon and a med kit, which you can use at any time to heal yourself at the press of a button. As you venture through the levels, you'll gain other weapons, from canned bombs to rocket launchers to less conventional fare such as tomatoes and pieces of cutlery, to even some situational weapons such as weed whackers. There are also other pickups to help you out, such as potions that can transform you into an uber beast of sorts that's invincible and can plow through walls for a short period of time, blow-up clowns that serve as temporary decoys, and there's even mystery potions with random effects, among other things. The key is managing your resources wisely, as your stock is fairly limited. Even your starting water pistol has a limited yet plentiful amount of shots, and while it's unlikely that you'll be completely out of resources, once it gets to that point, you'll be completely defenseless, and your only recourse is to flee and find some defense against the undead hordes. Zombies Ate My Neighbors is a game that I wish I had gotten around to sooner. It's one of those games I probably would have enjoyed more in my younger years than I do now, which isn't to say that I don't enjoy zombies now, but you do notice some minor things that keeps the game from achieving that high level of greatness that everyone else puts it on. The somewhat suspect hit detection that isn't entirely fantastic. The somewhat random nature of opening containers, which could either contain some helpful items, a booby trap, or nothing at all, the last one being quite annoying if it's behind a locked door. And also, I'm not a fan of the boss battles. Big giant contraptions that move around quickly and take plenty of hits to die. The fact that you still have to save victims during these rounds make things more aggravating than necessary, but that's the only real sour point that I have with this game. All of these minor bits dull zombies shine a bit, but get past those and you'll find this to be a very pleasant, very enjoyable little game. The premise is straightforward and simple to understand, yet there's enough depth to keep the player on their toes. New things pop up here and there, there's a wide variety of weapons and tools to experiment with, the creativity with some of the level concepts and especially the names of each level rides fairly high throughout. And while you do get to a point where the game starts to replay the hits one time too many, at 50 plus levels, 48 regular levels plus a few bonus maps, Zombies will keep you engaged, so long as you could survive its onslaught, because this can be a fairly challenging game, with zombies ganging up on you and some enemies requiring more than the typical pew-pew to properly dispose of. Oftentimes, it's a race against the clock, especially in later levels, where some of your victims will turn into werewolves when night falls, and that counts as a loss, so there's no rest for the living in this haunted romp. Control is simple, responsive, and functional. Using the B and A buttons to cycle through items for your Y and X buttons seems somewhat unnatural, but you do get used to it after a while. The game continues until you beat the game, run out of lives, or all the victims are killed off. So long as you have one victim left to save, you're still in the game, and every 40,000 points will revive one victim for the next round, or grant you an extra life if all are safe and sound. Every 4th level cleared will reward you with a password, making this one of those games where you only get a new password every few levels, which is kinda lame, but at least the passwords are fairly short. Passwords will also keep track of how many survivors remain, but not your equipment, meaning you'll be stuck with a default water pistol and nothing else, which may make some stages a hassle since you'll be missing some tools, but at least it'll be easy to restock. Well, sometimes. And again, it's 2-player co-op as well, so you could bring a buddy along for the ride and share the misery. Zombies is a game that doesn't seem like much and can sometimes be quite intimidating, but once you get a groove going, it can be a fairly entertaining little game with a shit ton of levels and creative ideas to keep you wondering what else they could throw at you. There's no shortage of clever creature ideas, and the graphics on a whole are nice, colorful, clean looking, with everything being fairly easy to make out. Stage themes eventually start to look a bit samey, and things will eventually get reused, but the game runs consistently, there's no lag or slowdown or anything like that. Visually, it suits the material and it looks good. Sound also gets a nod here. There is a limited number of tracks that play, and I'd imagine hearing them a couple dozen times might be grating after a while because they aren't that great, but they are varied somewhat. Some are playful, some are moody. Well, as moody as you could get with this game at least. The title screen music is the only tune that comes close to being spooky sounding, and yet it loses its spark once it gets recycled as background music for a stage that has you whacking weeds. Sound effects are simple cartoonish fare that are fine, suitable for the material once more, and that death scream when the victim dies is certainly haunting enough, even if everyone shares the same scream, even the dog. Zombies Ate My Neighbors is a fun little game. Good for a single-player romp, more thrilling as a co-op game, easy to pick up and play but challenging to overcome, but has enough charm and personality that it invites repeated playthroughs just to see if you could do better than your last run. Despite some minor quibbles, this is a pretty solid game that's fun to play, and I'm happy to see this get re-released because this is well worth checking out and just a big old blast to be had by all. Which is more than what I could say for the follow-up title, but that's for next time. Good night.